The galaxy was vast, full of worlds that humans had only begun to touch. Some were rich with metals, some shrouded in storms, and some were alive with colors that no human eye had ever seen. Humans were newcomers here, fragile compared to the ancient and towering species that had ruled these stars for millennia. They were traders, engineers, explorers, often underestimated and sometimes ignored. Yet humans had one thing that other species rarely possessed: courage born from the heart, not duty. On the planet Lysara, a world ruled by the great alien queen Alithia, a crisis had erupted. Lysara was unlike Earth. Its cities floated above violet oceans, towers stretched into clouds of shifting gas, and streets glowed faintly with bioluminescent light. But none of that mattered now. The queen's daughter, young and brilliant, had gone missing. Her absence sent shockwaves through the palace and the nearby systems. For centuries, Lysara's rulers had kept peace with their neighbors through careful diplomacy, but now all waited, tense and silent, for news of the child. Amid this chaos, in a quiet corner of the neutral space station Andros, an ordinary human named Ethan Jarrett went about his work. Ethan was a maintenance officer, responsible for repairs on docking bays and life support systems. He was not a hero, not trained for diplomacy, and certainly not a savior. Yet, as fate would have it, he would do what neither queens nor soldiers could. Ethan was finishing a routine inspection when he noticed a small movement near the supply corridor. At first he thought it was a stray pet of some alien species, but then he saw her, a small, trembling figure crouched in the shadows. Her skin shimmered faintly under the dim lights, and her eyes, large, golden, and wide with fear, locked on his. She could not have been more than 8 or 9 Lysaran years old, roughly equivalent to a human child. She was alone, injured, and terrified. The instinct to help hit Ethan immediately, stronger than any thought of danger. He knelt slowly, showing his hands were empty. "Hey, are you okay?" he asked in the softest tone he could manage. The child flinched at the sound of his voice but did not run. Fear mingled with something else, curiosity perhaps. Ethan slowly reached into his pack and pulled out a small ration pack. "Here, eat this," he said. "I won't hurt you," she hesitated, then took it with trembling hands. As she ate, Ethan noticed bruises on her arms, faint scratches on her face. Whoever had left her here, whether by accident or design, had not treated her kindly. "Where are your parents?" Ethan asked gently. She shook her head, unable to speak in words he could understand. Instead, she made a sound, soft, broken, almost like crying in a language only she knew. Ethan realized quickly she needed comfort more than anything. Over the next hour, he stayed with her, keeping her calm. He fixed her small injuries as best he could with his limited supplies. He told her stories about Earth, about humans, about how even the smallest person could make a difference. She listened quietly, slowly relaxing. Finally, the sound of footsteps echoed down the corridor. Ethan froze, glancing toward the approaching guards. Their armor gleamed under the station lights, insignias marking them clearly as the Queen's elite. He knew he had seconds to decide: flee and save himself, or stay and face an unknown outcome. He made his choice. Instead of running, Ethan moved toward the child and held her hand. "It's okay. They're not here to hurt you," he said. "I'll stay with you." The guards arrived, weapons lowered but wary. They immediately recognized her as the Queen's daughter. Their initial suspicion turned to surprise as they saw a human, calm and gentle, sitting with the child, soothing her like a parent. She is safe," one guard asked in his clipped language. "Yes," Ethan said firmly, keeping his gaze steady. "She's been alone, scared, and hurt. I helped her." The guards exchanged looks, then one nodded and motioned for the child. She clung to Ethan's hand for a moment, and he gave her a gentle squeeze before letting go. The guards lifted her carefully, speaking to her softly in their own language. She did not resist. When the Queen learned of the human who had saved her daughter, she was intrigued. Humans were not supposed to act this way. Most were considered weak, reckless, or self-serving. Yet here was a human who had faced unknown danger to protect a life that was not his own, a life that, in the eyes of Lysara, was priceless. The queen sent word for him to come to her world, not as a prisoner, not as a suspect, but as someone to be studied. His courage, his choices, and his heart had caught her attention, and Lysara did not forget debts, especially life debts. Ethan's journey to Lysara was both thrilling and terrifying. He had never left human space before, never traveled to a world ruled by a being older than the stars themselves. The shuttle carrying him passed through swirling clouds of violet gas, through cities that floated on currents of light. When he finally landed, he saw the Queen's palace, towering spires that gleamed like crystals, gardens with trees that hummed with faint music, and courtyards filled with creatures he had never imagined. He was led inside by attendants, silent and watchful. Every step he took echoed through the marble halls, every sound amplified by the enormous space. And then, finally, he saw her. Queen Alithia was unlike anything Ethan had ever seen. She was tall, regal, her skin like polished metal that shifted colors with the light. Her eyes were deep pools of amber, and when they focused on him, he felt as if she could see into the very core of his being. Around her, attendants and advisors waited silently. The palace was quiet, waiting for her reaction. "You saved my daughter," she said, her voice deep, resonant, and powerful. "No one has done so in centuries. No one has ever faced my guards, my world, to protect her. And yet you did. Why?" Ethan swallowed, suddenly feeling small despite the grandeur surrounding him. I don't know," he said honestly. "She was scared and alone. I couldn't just leave her." The queen studied him carefully. Most beings would have run, would have bargained, or would have sought reward, but not him. His actions were pure, guided by empathy rather than fear or greed. Lysaran law recognized this instinct. A life saved without thought of gain was sacred. "You are human," she said slowly, almost to herself. "And yet you possess a courage and kindness rare even among my own people. Tell me, do all humans act like this?" Ethan shook his head. "No, some do, some don't, but I think anyone can if they try." The queen's attendants whispered among themselves, shocked at her words. To openly praise a human in front of the court was unusual. To say that humans could surpass Lysarans in courage was almost unheard of. Queen Alithia extended her hand, a gesture of both acknowledgement and protection. "Then you are under my protection, Ethan Jarrett. While you remain in my world, no harm may come to you. You have earned my interest and my watchfulness." Ethan nodded, still unsure what this meant for him. Protection from a queen sounded like safety, but also like confinement. Yet as he looked at her, he realized this was not a cage. This was recognition, respect, and perhaps something more. He had saved a life without expectation, and in doing so, he had drawn the attention of one of the galaxy's most powerful beings. For the first time, Ethan understood a truth about the universe. Courage and kindness could travel further than ships or weapons. A single human act could ripple across stars, touching hearts that had never known humanity before. And in the quiet glow of the palace, as the queen watched him, Ethan realized that his life had changed forever. Not because he wanted it to, not because he sought glory, but because he had chosen to act when others might have turned away. Somewhere in the galaxy, a human had proven that the smallest being could make the largest difference, and Lysara would not forget it. Ethan Jarrett had never imagined that a simple act of kindness could change the course of his life. Yet here he was, standing in the heart of Queen Alithia's palace, under the watchful eyes of beings whose lifetimes stretched longer than any human history. The palace was magnificent. Towers of shimmering crystal rose into violet skies, gardens sang faint melodies with the breeze, and hallways glowed softly from floating lights that seemed alive. Yet all of this beauty could not ease Ethan's unease. He was a human among gods, or so it felt. At first, the palace staff treated him cautiously. He was offered the finest rooms, garments tailored to human comfort, and meals that were more lavish than anything he had seen on Earth. But he noticed the tension in the air. The attendants whispered about him constantly. The advisors watched his every movement, analyzing every word. They were wary, and Ethan could not blame them. Humans were small, fragile, and unpredictable. Most Lycarans did not see humans as equals. They were a species to observe, study, and sometimes ignore. And yet, Ethan's presence had already changed something in the palace. Queen Elithia herself requested that he meet her privately in the central hall of the palace, a massive room that seemed to float above the city. The floor was a mirror, reflecting the sky and clouds above, while the walls shimmered with living colors. When Ethan stepped in, she was waiting, seated on a throne that seemed to pulse with light. Her gaze was sharp, yet not unkind. "You have remained in my world for a full cycle," she said. "I observe you, human. You do not speak much, yet your actions, small and simple, speak louder than most words I have heard in centuries." Ethan bowed slightly, unsure if he should speak. I just did what felt right," he said. "I didn't think about reward or danger." The queen's lips curved in something like a smile. "That is what surprises me. Most beings would have considered their own safety. Most beings would have demanded something in return. But you acted out of care. That is rare." Ethan's stomach tightened. He had never been praised by anyone like this. Even Earth's leaders rarely noticed him. Yet here, one of the most powerful beings in the galaxy was watching him, valuing him, not for his strength or his rank or his knowledge, but for his heart. "You are under my protection now," she said. "No harm may come to you while you remain in my world. You have earned my trust and my watchfulness." "Watchfulness?" Ethan asked, trying to hide his nervousness. "Do not misunderstand," she replied. "It is not suspicion. It is attention, observation, curiosity, and gratitude." Ethan swallowed. He realized then that he was not only safe but significant. Somehow, the queen's favor meant more than safety, it meant opportunity. Days turned into weeks, and Ethan settled into life in the palace. He spent most of his time with the queen's daughter, Elira. She was shy at first, hesitant to trust a human completely. But slowly, through simple acts teaching her small human games, telling stories of Earth, listening to her fears, he became a figure she could rely on. She laughed more than she had in months, her golden eyes brightening with joy, and Ethan found himself smiling in return. Queen Elithia observed all of this, often from the shadows. She had expected fear or awe or perhaps even defiance. What she did not expect was the quiet bond forming between human and child, a bond of trust, patience, and kindness. It disturbed some of her advisors. "Your Majesty," one of them whispered one morning, "this human, he is a stranger. We cannot predict what he may do. Is it wise to allow him such influence over your daughter?" The queen did not look away from the window overlooking the floating city. "He has done what no Lycaran could. He has given her courage when she was lost. He has comforted her when even her own kin could not. That is not influence, it is guidance. And if I must choose between caution and wisdom, I choose wisdom." Yet Ethan's presence did not go unnoticed by the larger galaxy. Other species began to whisper. "A human is in the queen's palace," they said. "A human who saved the princess. A human she favors. Imagine what that could mean." Ethan had not come seeking power, recognition, or status. He only wanted to do what was right. But the universe had a way of amplifying small actions into legends. One evening, as Ethan walked through the palace gardens with Elira, the young princess turned to him. "Why do you care so much about me?" she asked. Ethan knelt beside her. "Because everyone deserves help when they are afraid," he said. "Even queens and princesses. Even if no one else can do it." She studied him, her golden eyes curious and trusting. "But humans are small. You are so tiny." "Small doesn't mean weak," he said with a faint smile. Sometimes being small helps you notice things others miss. And sometimes it means you care more deeply about others because you know how it feels to be fragile. Elira's smile widened. Then humans can be heroes. Some of us can, Ethan said. Some of us try. Unbeknownst to them, Queen Alithia watched from a balcony above. Her thoughts were not merely about Ethan's actions. She was beginning to understand something fundamental about humanity. They were unpredictable, yes, but in ways that made them remarkable. They did not follow logic first. They did not seek dominance first. They acted on instinct, compassion, and courage. And sometimes, that instinct could change the course of events in ways even the oldest beings could not anticipate. Political challenges soon arrived, subtle but sharp. Representatives from nearby systems began sending messages, questioning the Queen's decision to allow a human in her court. Some were polite, others thinly veiled threats. "Is this your way of weakening Lysara?" one message read. "A mere human, and yet you treat him with favor. How can we respect a queen who values a human over centuries of alliances?" Queen Alithia ignored most of the messages, but she did not dismiss them entirely. Instead, she summoned Ethan. "You are aware," she said, "that other rulers do not understand your presence here." "Yes," Ethan said simply. "I don't know much about politics, but I do know that helping Elira was right, and I won't stop." The Queen regarded him thoughtfully. "Most would shrink from this world, from its scrutiny, from its pressure. You do not. You act as you did before you knew what was at stake. That is rare." Ethan shifted uncomfortably. I don't think about myself much. I think about what's right." Queen Alithia's gaze softened. "That is why you are here. That is why you have my attention. And that is why, despite the protests of others, you will remain under my protection. No harm may come to you while I command it. You are mine to watch over." Ethan froze. "Mine to watch over," he repeated, unsure if he understood. "Not in the way you think," she clarified. "I do not claim you as property. I claim you as someone who saved my daughter's life. That act cannot be undone. It binds you, in a sense, to my house. You are a guardian, a witness, and a human whom I value above mere protocol. That is my decree." Ethan felt the weight of her words settle on him. He had expected gratitude, perhaps respect, but binding him forever, that was something he had never imagined. And yet, it felt right. In the following days, Ethan began to see the true power of human influence. Small acts, simple gestures, honest words, patient guidance, changed the Queen's daughter more than any royal tutor or grand ceremony could. The court began to notice. Advisors who had doubted him whispered privately about the human who had earned the Queen's trust. Ethan himself remained humble, unaware of the legends beginning to grow around him. He did not seek recognition. He did not seek reward. He simply acted from instinct, from empathy, and from courage, the same qualities that had driven him to save a frightened child on a distant space station. And through it all, Queen Alithia watched. Slowly, she realized that humans were not the fragile, short-lived creatures most of the galaxy believed them to be. They were unpredictable, resilient, and capable of acts of pure courage. In one human, she saw the potential of an entire species, the possibility that kindness, bravery, and heart could influence even the oldest, most powerful beings in the galaxy. By the end of the cycle, Ethan was no longer just a visitor. He was part of the palace, part of the Queen's life, and part of a story that would ripple across stars. He had arrived as an ordinary human, underestimated and fragile. Yet through courage, patience, and empathy, he had become something extraordinary. Somewhere in the galaxy, observers whispered a simple truth. Humans could change things. Humans could matter. Humans could be heroes. Ethan Jarrett had begun to feel at home in the palace, though home was a word that still felt strange. The corridors were immense. The ceiling stretched into shifting clouds, and the walls themselves shimmered with soft colors that seemed alive. Yet in all this grandeur, What mattered most was not the palace or its lights. It was the trust he had earned from Elira, the queen's daughter, and the quiet acknowledgement of Queen Alithia herself. For a human, his life had always been ordinary. Back on Earth, he had fixed machines, helped children, and never imagined that kindness could matter on a galactic scale. Now, in Lysara's court, every act he performed had consequence. Every small gesture, every word of honesty, was being observed by beings who were older and more powerful than he could have imagined. The Queen's court was a delicate place. Diplomats from nearby systems arrived, their expressions polite but their eyes sharp. They studied Ethan, noting his presence, questioning the Queen's judgment. Many whispered to each other, "Why favor a human over centuries of tradition? Why allow a being so fragile to gain influence?" Yet Ethan's actions continued to speak louder than their doubts. One morning, Elira approached him in the palace gardens, her small hands clasped together. "Ethan," she said softly, "my teachers say that humans are weak, that you could be hurt easily. Is that true?" Ethan shook his head. "No," he said. "We are small, yes. But that doesn't mean we are weak. Strength is not only about muscle or weapons. Strength is about what you do when you're afraid. It's about protecting those who cannot protect themselves. And it's about hope." Elira listened, her golden eyes wide. "You are very strong," she said simply. Ethan smiled. "Strong enough to help you, that's all that matters." It was that simple honesty that began to shift perception in the court. The Lysarans, who had watched him closely, began to notice patterns. How he treated the palace staff with respect. How he spoke to Elira not as a subject but as a friend. How he remained calm in tense situations. Humans, they began to realize, were unpredictable, but in a good way. They did not follow rules blindly. They followed reason and heart. And sometimes that heart could change even the oldest and most rigid systems. Political tension, however, was never far away. Some diplomats tried to challenge the Queen subtly. "Your Majesty," one representative said during a formal gathering, "is it wise to place a human, someone untested and unproven, so close to the royal family? What if his actions cause chaos? What if he misinterprets our laws or our customs?" Queen Alithia's response was calm but firm. "He has acted with honesty, courage, and compassion. That is more than most of your species can claim. His presence strengthens my daughter, my household, and my court. You may question him, but do not underestimate him." The room fell silent. Observers exchanged uneasy glances. Humans were small, fragile, short-lived. Yet here one stood, receiving the Queen's praise and the protection of her house. Ethan, for his part, remained humble. He had no desire for power or recognition. He only sought to do what was right. But even he began to notice subtle changes. The way other species whispered about him in corridors, the way palace staff began to treat him with a quiet respect, the way Elira's laughter seemed brighter when he was near. One evening the Queen called him to her study, a room filled with holographic displays showing star systems, planets, and fleets. She gestured for him to sit. "You have done well," she said, her eyes studying him closely. "You do not understand your impact yet. Humans, you are different. You think in ways we cannot predict. You act from emotion, yes, but that emotion has power. It changes hearts, it changes minds, and it can change history." Ethan swallowed. I don't know if I deserve that," he said quietly. "I only did what I thought was right. I didn't plan to impress anyone." The Queen inclined her head. "That is why it matters. The galaxy has long relied on power, fear, and authority. Humans rely on something else: courage, empathy, and choice. That is a force few understand, yet it is one that cannot be ignored. You have revealed it." Ethan realized in that moment that the galaxy's perception of humanity was shifting, not through wars or treaties or demonstrations of strength, but through a single human who had acted with a pure heart. Days later, an unexpected test arrived. Elira's tutors, experts in diplomacy and interstellar law, decided to examine Ethan's understanding of their court and customs. They devised puzzles and scenarios meant to confuse, intimidate, and expose him. One scenario involved a dispute between two visiting species, each claiming a right to a newly discovered resource on Lysara. The tutors expected Ethan to falter, to misinterpret the complex laws and make mistakes that would reveal human weakness. Instead, Ethan approached the situation calmly. He listened to both sides, asking questions that no Lysaran would consider. He focused on fairness and empathy, not just logic. Slowly, he guided the disputing parties toward a resolution that honored both cultures' needs. The room was stunned. He had not only navigated their customs but had shown insight that surpassed many seasoned diplomats. Humans, they began to realize, were not weak. They were clever, creative, and capable of seeing solutions that even ancient beings might miss. Queen Alithia observed from her seat. A quiet satisfaction touched her features. "See," she whispered to herself, "this is what I knew. Humanity, it surprises, it endures, it wins hearts without violence. Alira will learn more than laws from him. She will learn courage." That evening, Ethan spent time with Alira in the palace gardens. She was curious, asking questions about Earth humans and how his species survived without the power, speed, or longevity of Lysarans. "Your people are small," she said, "and yet you change things." "How is that possible?" Ethan thought for a moment. "Because we try," he said. "We try to care, to help, to make things better even when it's hard. Other species, they sometimes forget what matters. Humans, we remember, we act, and sometimes that's enough." Alira's eyes shone with understanding. "Then humans are heroes." "Some of us can be," Ethan said with a gentle smile. "We don't need strength or weapons to be heroes. We just need courage to do what's right." Meanwhile, news of the human in the palace began to spread quietly across the galaxy. Traders, diplomats, and even rival kingdoms spoke in hushed tones. A human had earned the queen's trust, helped her daughter, and influenced Lysaran politics. Many were skeptical. Some were jealous, but the story carried a subtle warning: underestimate humans at your own risk. The queen's advisors were forced to reconsider their own assumptions. "Perhaps the human is more than he seems," one murmured during a private council. "He acts without fear. He thinks in ways we do not. He earns loyalty and respect, even from the queen." The queen herself did not need to speak. Her decision had already been made. Ethan had proven his worth, not through ambition, not through war, but through heart and courage. Weeks later, a formal celebration was held for Alira's recovery and growth. The palace was filled with dignitaries, scholars, and beings from across systems. Ethan was seated near the queen, not as a servant or guest, but as a recognized protector and advisor. The subtle tension from before had shifted. Many of the attendees whispered to each other, marveling at the human who had quietly earned a place of honor. When the queen rose to speak, she addressed the hall with authority. "This celebration is not only for my daughter's health," she said. "It is for a reminder that courage, kindness, and action can matter more than strength or lineage. Let it be known that one human, Ethan Jarek, has shown us what it means to act with heart. Let it be remembered that even the smallest being can achieve greatness, and that humanity is a force worthy of respect." The room was silent for a moment, absorbing her words. Then, slowly, applause began, spreading across species, ranks, and generations. Ethan felt a warmth rise within him. He had never sought this. He had never expected it, yet it was real. And in that moment, something shifted, not just for Ethan or Alira or the Queen, but for the galaxy. Humans were no longer merely fragile newcomers. They were clever, brave, and capable of shaping events far beyond their own worlds. Queen Alithia watched him with quiet pride. She had claimed him in her house not out of possession, but because his actions had bound him to her family forever. Not by law, but by choice and courage. Through one small human, the galaxy had begun to see humanity's potential, its courage, its cleverness, and its heart. Ethan Jarrett, ordinary man from Earth, had revealed humanity to the universe. Ethan Jarrett had walked the corridors of Lysara's palace for months now, yet each step still carried weight. He was no longer merely a visitor, no longer a human just passing through. He was part of something far greater, a family, a court, and a story that would ripple across the stars. Yet he did not feel trapped, not even for a moment, because what had bound him to this place was not chains but choice. Courage, empathy, and the simple act of saving a child had tied him to Queen Alithia's household forever, and he knew, deep in his heart, that he would not have it any other way. The Queen summoned him to the central hall, the same room where she had first spoken to him months ago. The floating lights shimmered, reflecting on the mirrored floors, and the sky above glowed violet with clouds that seemed alive. Ethan stepped forward cautiously, unsure what the Queen intended. "You have done well, Ethan Jarrett," Queen Alithia began, her voice resonant and calm. "You have remained steadfast, patient, and true. You have protected my daughter, guided her, and without effort shown us all what it means to act with courage." Ethan bowed, feeling the familiar warmth of her approval. "I only did what felt right," he said softly. She studied him closely, her amber eyes unblinking. "That is precisely what makes you extraordinary. Your actions were not dictated by law, duty, or ambition. They were dictated by heart, and that is why you are mine to claim." The words struck Ethan with both awe and understanding. "Claim," he repeated. "You mean I'm yours?" "Not in the way you might fear," she clarified. "You are not property. You are not a servant. You are a human who saved my daughter, who has proven your worth through action and spirit. By our law and tradition, such an act binds a being to the house they saved. It is a bond of honor, respect, and protection. You are part of my family, part of my household forever." Ethan's heart raced. The reality of it sank in slowly. He had never imagined that a simple act, helping a frightened child, could change his life so completely. And yet here he was, bound not by force but by recognition, gratitude, and trust. He nodded slowly. I understand," he said, "and I accept." The Queen's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "Good. Then let this day mark a new chapter for you, for Elira, and for humanity." Word of the formal claim spread quietly at first, then quickly across the galaxy. Traders, diplomats, and scholars whispered of the human who had earned the trust of one of the oldest and most powerful beings in existence. Some were skeptical, others cautious, but all began to see the truth. Humans were not weak. They were clever, brave, and capable of actions that could shape empires without weapons or fleets. Ethan, for his part, did not seek fame or influence. He spent his days helping Elira learn about the universe, teaching her about Earth, and guiding her in ways that nurtured her spirit rather than her power. He continued to treat palace staff with respect, offering help without expectation, listening carefully, and showing patience. Slowly, the court began to see him not as a human outsider, but as a bridge between worlds, a living proof that courage and empathy could surpass age, size, and power. One afternoon, the Queen called Ethan to the balcony overlooking the floating gardens. The sun, a pale violet star, cast gentle light across the crystalline towers. Elira was nearby, playing with a group of young Lycerans, laughing freely. Ethan watched her for a moment, his heart full. "You have done more than you know," Queen Alithia said, her voice soft yet carrying the weight of centuries. "You have changed the hearts of my people, the way my daughter sees the world, and even how the galaxy perceives humanity. You have revealed potential in your species that many have long overlooked." Ethan turned to her. I only did what anyone would do," he said, though he felt the truth of her words settle over him. "I only helped someone who needed it." "That is what makes you remarkable," she said. "Others act for reward, for fear, or for duty. You acted from heart. That is a force that even the greatest fleets and the oldest laws cannot match. Humanity, through you, is no longer unknown. For the first time, Ethan felt the weight of his influence. A single human, small and fragile by Lyceran standards, had shifted the way an entire civilization, and perhaps even the galaxy, thought about humans. Weeks turned into cycles, and life in the palace settled into a new rhythm. Ethan trained Elira in skills beyond etiquette or diplomacy. He taught her stories of courage, of humans who overcame impossible odds, and lessons about empathy, patience, and cleverness. The princess grew stronger, not in muscle or magic, but in heart and mind. She began to solve problems with creativity, speak with confidence, and face challenges without fear. Other species visiting the palace noticed the change. Whispers spread. The human teaches more than Lycerans can. The human shapes minds without violence. The human earns trust without threats. Even skeptics could not deny it. Humans, once dismissed as small, fragile beings, were proving their worth through wisdom, courage, and heart. One evening, Ethan found himself alone with Queen Alithia in the council chamber. Holograms of star systems floated around them, showing trade routes, resource clusters, and distant colonies. She gestured toward the maps. "You have insight that many of my advisors do not," she said. "Your perspective is not bound by tradition. You see possibilities, outcomes, and solutions in ways no Lyceran could. That is a gift, and it is a reminder that humans, though small, can shape events beyond their size." Ethan looked at the maps, then back at her. "I only notice what's in front of me," he said. "I don't plan for empires or politics, I just try to do what's right." "And that is why you succeed," she said. "Your heart is your strength. It is the force that guides you, protects others, and inspires them. The galaxy will remember this, Ethan, and so will I." Time passed, and the bond between human and queen grew stronger, not as master and servant, but as mutual respect and trust. Elira thrived under Ethan's guidance, the young princess blossoming into a leader with both strength and compassion. The palace was no longer just a seat of power. It became a place where kindness, courage, and humanity could flourish. Diplomats from other worlds began to visit Lysara, curious about the human in the queen's house. Some came to study him, others to challenge him. Yet Ethan faced them all with calm, honesty, and cleverness. No weapons, no intimidation, only the quiet force of reason, empathy, and courage. By the time visitors left, they were often left with respect, admiration, and a newfound understanding of humanity. Eventually, Queen Alithia formally recognized Ethan before the entire court. The announcement was simple, yet powerful. "Ethan Jarrett," she said, her voice carrying through the grand hall, "is claimed by my house forever. Not as property, not as servant, but as guardian, protector, and witness to my daughter's growth. His actions have proven the strength, courage, and heart of his species. Let all who hear this know. Humanity is a force to respect, and he, a human, is part of our family." Applause erupted across the hall. Representatives of distant systems whispered, exchanged glances, and quietly many nodded. The galaxy had witnessed something remarkable. Ethan felt a warmth in his chest, not pride but belonging. He had not sought this. He had only acted with a simple heart. And yet, in doing so, he had earned trust, respect, and the knowledge that he had made a difference far greater than he had imagined. In the quiet that followed, Ethan stepped out into the palace gardens with Elira. She looked at him with admiration, her golden eyes shining. You changed everything," she said. "Not just for me, but for everyone." Ethan smiled. "I just helped you," he said softly. "You changed too, that matters more." Elira laughed, a clear, bright sound that echoed through the gardens. "Then humans really are heroes." Ethan looked up at the sky, violet clouds swirling above the floating towers. For the first time, he felt the full weight of what had happened. A single act of kindness, a decision to help a frightened child, had shifted the way a queen, her people, and perhaps the galaxy viewed an entire species. And in that moment, he understood something fundamental. Humans were not defined by size, age, or strength. They were defined by heart, by courage, by the willingness to act when others might stand still. Queen Alithia joined them silently, watching the princess and the human together. She reached out, placing a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "You are claimed, Ethan, and yet you are free. Free in a way few can ever be. You have earned this honor not through power, not through fear, but through heart. That is humanity's gift, and through you it shines." Ethan looked at her and nodded. "I understand," he said simply, "and I will do my best." Above them, Lysara's towers glimmered in the light of distant stars. Across the galaxy, whispers began. Humanity is no longer small. Humanity is capable. Humanity is a force to respect. And all it took was one human who chose to save a child. The galaxy would never forget.